So this particular conversation is really core to that purpose, which is we are an inclusive community that wants to inspire women and allies to thrive where life means finance and technology. So inclusivity really should come from the start. There are a lot of lessons that we have learned from the technologies already developed and in the market being used, what we call these days the Web 2.0 technologies. And now we are at this cusp where there's a potential for change and there's a potential for a more equitable change. So this conversation is really important from that perspective. So I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves in a minute. But before we do that, we have a good number of people online. So I want to do this. Of course, we are recognizing International Women's Day that happened earlier this month. And this is also the Women's History Month. So there's a lot of focus on conversations like this. But on the fun side, today is also International Happiness Day. So I'm going to ask all of you to come on camera for just 15 seconds, and we're going to snag a screenshot with happy smiles so that we can get that as well and share it with everybody. So come on screen if you're ready. Well, we have a handful. We'll take what we have. This, Maria. So wonderful. Let's just take this. We'll take this quick cut of the screen, and then we'll share it with folks. All right. I think I got it. So excellent. So now I'm going to hand it off to our speakers to introduce themselves. And for folks who just joined, please mute yourself as we go through the session. And then if you have questions, drop it in the chat. I'll watch for the questions, and then at appropriate times in the middle, I might ask the questions to the team, or if not, open it up at the end for questions. So with that, Rulonna, you're first on my screen. Would you like to introduce yourself? We'll then go to Jodi and Namee.
Sure. First of all, thank you. I think this is such an interesting conversation that hopefully we have many more of these to come, I think, to continue the dialogue. My name is Rulonna Neilson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Community Capital Technology based in New York City. I was the first employee of the firm. So I joined when we were sitting on a small sofa in the founder's apartment with his 5 roommates. And I sat on a stool right under an air conditioner with my laptop for the first several months while we were figuring out how we were going to get things launched. We have a loan trading platform that connects financial institutions and non-bank financial institutions with one another to buy and sell credit on the secondary market, but also have an origination channel as well. So our clients we've got about 1,200, 1,300 financial institutions on the platform. So it is a pretty active and dynamic marketplace. And we are dealing on the front lines of financial services every single day, and our technology company delivering a solution to them. So this is certainly a conversation that I'm very interested in and get to interact with a lot of people in that space who are thinking about some of these challenges.
Thank you. Jodi, can I give it to you?
Yes, hi everybody. I am Jodi Detjen. I am a professor and associate dean at Suffolk University, and I'm also co-managing partner at Orange Grove Consulting, where we work using technology and analytics to really help manage the talent process more inclusively and more effectively. My background, I started out as a computer programmer. I always like to say back when women were 40% of the computer programmers of the world. I won't tell you when, but so I've always had an extreme interest in tech, and now really getting into the AI world and very concerned about the lack of women in AI. So excited to have this conversation today.
Thanks, Jodi. Namee?
Hi, I'm Namee Oberst. I'm the founder of AI Blocks. We actually make LLMware. It's an open source project that provides end-to-end LLM platform. And we also have over 50 models, open source and Hugging Face. And we are one of the first, if not the first people to really focus on small language models for the enterprise. So I was very happy to start to work with all the wonderful people at FinTech Women, and especially Jagati, thank you for organizing all this, because I think that we're all here to talk about something that's that's happening right now that's very, very important and kind of timely.
Yeah. Thank you. If you folks in the audience have been listening closely, we have actually a very good end-to-end ecosystem. We have Rulonna at the front end, who looks at financial products being developed and sees, yes, and we're going to talk about this some more, but is seeing disparity right there. Then we have Namee, who's in the midst, building out these technologies that are going to define the future, not just of financial services, but of life, right? All of us use money. So how do we consume money? How do we use money? And do we have a voice in that, which is also the theme. So Namee is seeing that. And Jodi, as you just described, you've seen this for a period of time, and you're actively in the midst, both as an educator and your consulting work in bringing that change for several years now. So with that kind of overarching start, I want to ask all of you, a question, which is a question to kick us off, which is, what do you think is the current state? You kind of all of you alluded to it, and each of you in our prep have mentioned, look, we are at a point of crisis, and we are there already. It's not coming, we are there already. So as you're talking about, where are we with AI and financial services, and where are we generally with AI, could you also bring that, your notion of crisis point? And I'll leave it open. Any one of you can kick us off with this one.
I can start.
I think you should tell us who to start, Jodi, because I think
I'll start just with the background, because I could just give some numbers. So then I'll just leave it. So basically, I had reached out to Jagati a couple months ago because I was seeing something alarming, like a trend on my platform that I just wanted to I think will be great for everyone else to chime in with. So we have an active YouTube channel, and we also have a very active community on open source where people can come in and leave stars. I get to see a little bit of their, a little bit of gender breakout. And what I was seeing is that on my YouTube platform, I was seeing only 3% of those folks watching our content be women. 3%, folks. And that probably includes me, because I have to watch all of my own videos to edit, etc. And some of the people that I work with. So if you strip that out, it's probably more like 2%. And then we have a Discord community where I see less than probably 5 women out of 350. So just alarming statistics. So then I raise the flag, and then I'll leave it up to Rulonna and Jodi.
So I think, I'll just quickly jump in. I think that that's exactly right? If you look anywhere, you do a simple search on the internet, you're going to see the statistics aren't in our favor. Men are vastly more likely. I mean, I think I'd read something, as I was thinking through this, is 54% of men are using AI in their daily lives or careers, and 35% of women. That is a material gap. And I read something, gosh, it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, that said, if you don't have AI in your life in some way, you are losing relevance. Think about that, right?
Yeah,
losing relevance. And I think, Jodi, that probably is a good segue into some of your thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you some stats, and then I'll tell you what I'm looking at from the big picture. So only 26% of jobs in data and AI are held by women. This is in 2020. Hasn't gotten better. And 16% of tenure track faculty in AI globally, and only 22% in all AI and computer science PhD programs in the US. And this data is all from like 2019, 2020, because we don't have the more recent data. The data is bad. I'll also tell you, like I said in my intro, that back, women were first off the first computer programmers, because that's why it was software, right? Software, not hardware. The men were in the hardware. Then in the 90s, it all showed up, and women left in droves because it got broified. So we have to understand the technical history, why women have gotten out of tech. So now what's happened is that we are creating a new world with AI. Let's just think about the dramatic change. I listened to Sam Altman yesterday get interviewed on a webcast. He was talking about, we don't even know what ChatGPT 5 is going to look like yet. He doesn't know the impacts. That's how dramatic the increase is going to be. Women are not there. So we're redefining our entire world, and women are on the table. Let's think about the implications of this. This is serious. This is not like, we'll go to social work. No. This is about redefining our world, and women are nowhere to be found. This, to me, is why it's a crisis.
So, Jodi, I'm going to lean on that last part you said, right? And I know the answer, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. and this is for everybody, I think also sets the basis. Why is it important for women to be there? Why
because we're redefining the world. You know, automation is happening everywhere with AI. We're thinking about how jobs are being redefined. We're thinking about who should be laid off. We're thinking about what skills are most important. And the conversations being had by Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Satya Nadella.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about the differential in power here. I'll give you another example. We are talking about monetizing the collective intelligence of humanity, monetizing it.
Yeah.
This is another form of capital. We're creating a new form of capital. And who will own that capital?
That's right.
I mean, let alone on the high levels, Jodi, I was, I reach out more to the developer community. So that's more our user base. So what to me was alarming is that the developer community is around 2 to 3% of the people who are working on actively touching generative AI. So I have a large sample to draw from because I think there are over 50,000 users of our project in open source. So it's a large sampling, folks. It's not just like out of 100. And I think that the numbers are so small on the developer side, let alone, on both sides, really, on the highest of the high, like leadership levels. But the people who are developing AI right now, who, through channels will hopefully rise up. So if you're thinking we're starting with like a 3% base of women, where will we be?
That's right.
If you just
project not be there.
out, it's really scary. So it is something to be, something that we all need to discuss. We need to figure out how do we fix this. And, that's why I think we're all here is to raise awareness of this issue, figure out, what do we need to do to try to to ameliorate the situation, and how do we all collectively raise our voices so that we're heard and we fix this fast.
Let me just add one more thing that I think we need to be conscious of is that what AI is going to be automating is a lot of the administrative piece, at least initially, before it gets to the higher level white collar work. And administration is predominantly dominated by women. So if you think about healthcare, right? You go to your doctor, the insurance, the check-in, the scheduling, all of that's going to be AI'd because it's easy to AI at the first stage. Those are all women running those.
And there's a big McKinsey study exactly on that, Jodi, right, that just came out that touches on that I would encourage people listening to kind of look up, and I'm certainly even happy to share a link after this to those who are interested to it, that talks about exactly that the disproportionately AI is going to impact women and women's careers and jobs. And so they have to care. And, one of the things I was thinking about to the point that I think both Namee and Jodi have mentioned here, which is we sort of missed the boat. We can't catch up. I mean, the algorithms are written, they are out there. And if you wonder how bias works its way in, look at the fiasco that the Google Gemini launch had, right? Where bias can get introduced in all kinds of different ways that can produce all kinds of different outcomes. I think the challenge to me where we may want to be turning our attention in this crisis is algorithms are nothing without activity and engagement.
That's right.
And it is driven off of that. And so where is our power? Our power is in engagement. How do we shift as women to start to use it, to get over our inherent, and this is a conversation that Namee and Jagati and I had a little bit last week around why are women not using AI? What is it about the way women interact, the way women engage with new information? I think I've got some thoughts on that, but I think it's an interesting conversation is how do we get over some of the resistance there? Because that is the only way we're going to begin to shape the dialogue is through our own engagement. The fuel of any algorithm is activity. It has nothing unless you're in there providing prompts, you're in there providing information. So we are amplifying and worsening the bias every day that we are not engaged and at the table by actually using, interacting, and understanding what's happening in AI.
Rulonna, I want to lean on that one and maybe shift here because this is also something we discussed briefly. We are looking at this from the lens of financial services. And for me, that is important for two reasons. Everything you folks said about AI, I think, is amplified in financial services because it is about money. And we know financially women are also disadvantaged across the world, right? That thesis has also been made. But you had kind of pulling a thread from what Jodi said in the 90s, tech got brofied. So, and you had some interesting thoughts on behavior. So looking back to why we are here, even in financial product development, there isn't that level of diversity. Could you talk a little bit about that? And then we move from there to then integrate that with tech as well.
Yeah. You know, one of the observations that I have, which I've given a lot of thought to, is I've worked in finance in many different dimensions for many years on the technology side of things for the last 15, 20 years. I've worked for a wealth tech company and now a marketplace technology company. I think that the way women often problem solve, there is a confidence gap often with women where they feel the need to have competence before they speak, before they engage. Inherently, men are more likely to jump in even without experience, without competence and knowledge, and that makes trying something new challenging. I think there's another element of, you know, I was talking to one woman ahead of this and sort of saying, she's like, you know, I don't really use it. I feel like it's cheating. How interesting is that, right? That you hear something that can amplify and enhance what you do, but it's like, well, if I use that, it's actually not legit. It's not authentic. It's not creative. It's not organic. And how critical it is that we overcome that thinking, because again, we are losing relevance if we are not engaging with that. So, I mean, those were a couple of observations I had just from my own personal experience working in financial services, working at the intersection of technology and financial services, and seeing the gender gap on both the development side as well as on the business side. And a lot of the way in which women sometimes don't get seats at the table because of risk aversion or confidence gaps that really need to be overcome.
And let me jump in here because we've done some research on this space, and it's pretty evident that there's a lot of assumptions about what gender is and about what women are supposed to do and not do that have been internalized by women. And one of them is that, we know we're not supposed to like money. So it's very difficult to, for example, it's very difficult in women-dominated industries to have referrals, help me build my business. Ooh, that's kind of yucky. And technology has been, because it was broified in the 90s, became this thing that was male-based. And this starts early on. This starts in high school, where if you see who's going into calculus and who's going into programming, and the girls are saying, oh, that's not for me. That's not for me. I'm not really allowed in that space. And so, yes, there's plenty of external bias, but I think we really have to address this problem with women, especially young women, not moving into this space. And one of the things that's actually really interesting, there's some interesting research that talks about how we label it is differently. So if we talk about AI as being really math-based, because of this bias, this gender assumption that women aren't as good at math, which, by the way, all of us, I'm sure, in this webinar are good at math. So let's just say it out loud. Clearly we're good at math or we wouldn't be in the roles that we're in. So let's just blow that assumption out the door. But anyway, put that aside. If we reframe it as you getting into AI is going to help make the world a better place and help make AI work for the world. Now, all of a sudden, we've labeled it and reframed it in a way that women are more likely to come in. So I think we have to talk about AI in a different way, so that it becomes more welcoming to women because of these gender stereotypes.
Namee, I'm going to ask you. It feels like you're living this, right? It doesn't feel. I know you're living this. You're seeing that women are hesitant. So, what do you think? Well, your opinions on both what Rulonna and Jodi said, but also where do you think that shift could happen?
I'll just go off of what Jodi said. So I'm a little bit of two minds. So on the one hand, do we need to kind of rephrase it in a different way for women? So, I want to challenge that a little bit, because I just want it to be equally attractive no matter what gender. So the way I think I try to approach it is, I wrote an article in Dev, it's a big newsletter community for devs. And I just encourage current software developers to try AI. And we've released a series of 7 YouTube videos to teach you how to get started in AI, like for free, but in a very in-depth manner. So I want people to think about almost retooling. So if you're currently a software developer, there are free tools if you just know how to code in Python, like the most basic language, but it's AIs in Python. So if you just know how to code in Python, you can shift over to working with AI. So I want to demystify it. So AI is not some big scary thing. There are a lot of free tools out there to help you get started. That's the great thing about open source, especially. And I wanted to just make it more approachable for everyone, of course, including women. Please, if you're a woman and if you know how to code in Python, please get started. So that's the approach that I've been taking. And then in terms of math and science, I think this is where education comes in. I really hope that young girls in middle school, high school feel encouraged, and they are actively encouraged to study math and science. And I think those numbers have not been as high as we would have liked in terms of participation. But I almost think we have to go down to middle school or high school. And why is that happening? Why is that the case? I don't understand it. So maybe Jodi, from your educator's perspective, you have a better answer. But at the same time, I personally do want to. I'm not in favor of rebranding AI to something softer, because I feel like it makes us feel as if we're not ready for the task, but we are.
So I almost think it's an interesting question. I don't know if people can raise their hands on their screen. How many of the people on this call have actually done some form of coding?
Yeah, maybe I just say feel free to text.
Yeah, just raise
hands. Many people have raised their hands. It's a good smattering. It's not as widespread though, Rulonna. That's very fine. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting, right? To say, who here has done that? And I think, Namee, to your point, why wouldn't you do that? It sounds overwhelming. There inherently would be, am I competent enough to do it, right? What are tools where somebody can go out and have an opportunity to do something basic? That might even be a great follow-up resource is, if you're someone who just wants to learn the very basics of it, you don't have to build the Death Star right, tomorrow. You don't have to go out and build an algorithm. Just familiarizing yourself with what does coding mean can help then really reduce the threshold or resistance or intimidation by interacting with some of these rapidly evolving tools that are out there.
Yeah. And even if you don't code, let's just say you don't code. Yeah. Even if you don't code, actually, there are a lot of ways to get involved, because let's just say you don't really want to code and you don't code, but there are so many facets of learning about just general, conceptualizing how does retrieval augmented generation work. It starts with document ingestion, then you parse, you index, you embed, you have embedding models, you have vector databases. So just understanding those types of concepts that are very technical. How does one generally train a language model? You don't need to code per se. They're just concepts that you could just start to at least comprehend. But even that is one more step above where we are today, I think.
Well, you can even think about the business applications of it. How can you use AI to analyze a data set or analyze a managerial decision making, or I read an article last week about AI giving regular feedback in the workplace. There's 1,000 different ways that we can use AI. And so people can think about this in terms of application, even if you're not interested as much into the technical piece. So I think talking about this in a wide-ranging way really opens the door, I think. I think also the other piece of it is that when you get to this confidence gap piece, I think it's a really important piece, because this is a new technology. And if we want, you mentioned earlier, Namee, about why girls aren't getting into this, and this happening really in K through 12, all through college, because oftentimes there's a threshold to get into these, emerging technologies. And a lot of people, and these are women and people of color who are underrepresented, often have this, I am not sure I'm good enough, so I don't even want to put myself in the queue. And if you look at somebody like, there's a couple of universities that have really opened the door to this. Carnegie Mellon is one, where they created 2 tracks. For example, track 1 was if you've had previous programming experience, and track 2 was if you're just interested in, so you can come in fresh. They have now 50-50 women, because they totally changed it to eliminate this confidence gap. and build the confidence internally. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to change the pipeline process to open the doors more to be able to use it. And then to your point, Namee, reduce this barrier of oh my God, it's just too scary. It's not scary. It's just another tool.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right, Jodi.
And I like the word tool, right? Because I think that's also one of the kind of founding concepts for FinTech women. It is not all about coding. It's not all about technology. You can play literally every single role a regular business has, from finance to, and if you're a finance to marketing to operations to project management. I don't have to list them all, but we can do that. And, at the very least, if you think of it, if you're in finance as a corporate finance person looking to sign off on a funding for AI, you need what you both just spoke. You need to understand the concepts of what you're investing in. So it's the knowledge. I like that Carnegie Mellon example of saying 50-50. You don't need coding experience. But I want to take this. We always run short on time for these things, so I want to take this to a slightly different area, but tangential. Coming back to the notion of financial services, right? All three of you have spoken about this. They're not in the initial design of the product, because you just mentioned it's a tool at the end of the day to solve a problem, and they're not here in the initial design of the products. Then they're not in technology when we're building those products, so the products are not being designed with that, with women in mind, with women users in mind. Let me step back. The financial products are not being designed initially with women users, women consumers. Then they're not being developed with technology with those kind of consumers in mind. And therefore, getting them to adopt those would be a one step more difficult than otherwise. If we let this go, and this is a little bit of shock value here, if we don't bring change into this today, what do you see would happen in the next, say, 2030, next 6 years, next 10 years? What would the world look like? Or what could the world look like?
I don't want to go there personally.
Yeah, I mean, it would look like when we all, I don't want to, when I started, I by way of background, I started as a corporate lawyer. Like when I started practicing corporate law many years ago, I would be the only woman in a room of 20 people. It would be quite frightening, I think.
Yeah. I think that, us, the more we remove ourselves from being part of this process and having being part of the dialogue and influencing where things are going, the more we're just going to amplify all these disparities. And, you talked a little bit around, what's happening in wealth in the coming storm with women who we are going to quickly, for all the ground that's being gained from a wealth perspective, that's going to evaporate. It'll be like sand under our feet. If we are, the more these technologies begin to take over, these tools become integrated, the more we're removed from influencing them and then potentially using them, the more that wealth gap is going to, instead of continuing to decrease, is going to begin to increase dramatically. And the rate of change and the coming storm, frankly, the absolutely upending of everything we know our world to be is we are at the brink of that. And so I fear an Armageddon-like impact in terms of the role, the voices, the achievements of women getting rolled back almost overnight if we don't aggressively work to figure out how we keep at the table and participating in how this vast shift.
But let me just share a little bit of history, because I think to give us a little bit of hope. So oftentimes we think AI started with like Musk and Sam Altman, but here's something, and this is out of TechCrunch. Elaine Rich, retired computer science from University of Texas, published one of the first textbooks in AI in 1983. Harvard professor Cynthia Dwork made waves decades ago in the fields of AI fairness and differential privacy and distributed computing. That's back in 1988. And then Cynthia Brazel was a roboticist and professor at MIT and co-founder of Jibbo in the late 90s and early 2000s. So women have always been involved in AI. And so I think part of the story to motivate these young women is to really paint this Armageddon picture and show that they're not alone. Like, we have a history of women being involved in this. Yeah. We have a history.
And another thing, though, is that unlike maybe 30 years ago, I think at that time, people knew, I mean, a lot of women knew that we kind of had to promote this as an issue and band together and group together to unite, to be heard. But I'm actually not sure that that's the case right now. Right. So we were talking about awareness, even among women, about this issue. And I felt in LinkedIn, one of my least popular posts just is like, anytime I talk about bias, and it's like, it hardly gets, like, nobody even likes it. Nobody seems to care. So that was also alarming, is not only is this happening, but there seems to be apathy towards this issue. And this is a huge difference because, like, 20 or 30 years ago, there wasn't this apathy. I think women were more prone to combine together, to support each other, to talk about it. And now I'm not actually sure how many people are really talking about it openly, how many people seem to care, how many people are raising their voices out of concern. So that by itself is also alarming to me, like this at least perceived apathy and this lack of almost a group movement.
Namee, I'm just out of curiosity, do you have a thought as to why you think you're seeing that apathy?
I think for the last 20 years, we seem to have reached a level of, let's say, gender equity that seems to be acceptable. And so, I mean, this is just my opinion. I have no studies to back this up, but that's a stark difference from when I started. Like, when I started, women, like, barely in my corporate law firm, like, it was a big deal when a woman partner showed up in a pantsuit. Like, so from then, to the last 20 years, I do feel like women have had more empowerment in the workforce. Women have had more opportunities to have a career while raising a family. It was like, it became, at least there were more concessions in the workplace, the kinds of concessions like I didn't have when I started working. But so I think that led to some kind of a comfort zone where people feel like, oh, we have enough rights, or maybe do people feel like, oh, we are maybe equal. I mean, I have other social theories around this too with younger women, but maybe younger women, because they haven't experienced this overt bias like 30 years ago, feel like, oh, we're just at a comfortable point, but not realizing that I think we're quickly sliding towards, where we were 30 years back, except now we don't even have a movement to support this.
Right. We need somebody on TikTok.
Anyone here?
That's what we need. I'm not TikToker, but
yeah, because that's where change happens, right? But
that younger generation, that is where change happens.
Yep. So. Yeah. And sometimes I see reels that just amplify the traditional thinking. Women as
stay-at-home girlfriend.
Just horrifying. Yes, just horrifying. But by the way, very much late in the game, and I'll confess this, I realized that I could have pinned just the four of us on the screen, and we could have had a much more organized recording. But it is what it is. So here's what I want to. As I was hearing you folks talk, right? I think that definitely, the risk that we go back in 10 years to not having or losing the change we made in terms of financial equity is very real. At the same time, there's a lot of study done that by 2030, there's going to be what they're calling the great wealth transfer, where women are going to, whether they inherit it, because women tend to live longer than men, whether they inherit it or they have just worked on it themselves, there is going to be a lot of wealth, significant amounts. You're talking billions and trillions of dollars that are going to be controlled by women. So if one is going to take a more hopeful point of view and recognize that if smart businessmen today, and I say the word businessmen very carefully, right, because they're running the business today, are watching that that the future, the wealth is going to be controlled by women, and if they want they want a slice of that, whether it is as bankers and having it as savings and investments, whether it is as entrepreneurs who want a slice of that for their businesses and such, what would you tell them to do? Again, I have a sense I know what the answer is, but it's more looking hopeful, right? It's what we know in this group, that women need to be part of the conversation. They should be in there today. But I'm moving more towards how can we get there? And here I'm thinking there's a real business imperative for anybody who's in the business of financial services today.
Well, I might speak to it from a little bit of a twist, from the perspective of the women who are going to have the money. So you look at what Ruth Gottsman did, funding medical school, right? For that talk about legacy impact there. So I would, rather than charge the men who are in many cases on the flip side running, or the male dominated institutions, or the money managers and the deployers of capital, that women need to start taking much more charge and using the power that money brings to wield influence and enter the space, whether that is investing in technology companies, whether that's investing in education to ensure that the next generation of women begin to have a less and less of a confidence gap. I think I would charge those wealth inheritors, those wealth creators, to really take very seriously how they're deploying their wealth, and begin to take charge.
Yeah, you see it with Melinda Gates.
That's right.
See it with, do you remember her first name, Bezos' ex-wife?
Yeah.
They're making extremely strategic investments in how to make the world a better place. And in both cases, they're looking at women and girls in a lot of it as well. I think that's what we have to do. However, if we look at nonprofit investment, most money does not. Women and girls, nonprofits are severely underfunded comparatively. Right. So we need more women to step up. Rulonna, I totally agree with you. But to Namee's point earlier, there needs to be this wake-up call. We need to figure out how to wake this younger generation up, as well as the older generation, and say, look, this is the time. And I don't know how to do that. We do a lot of work with women's leadership education and really try to help women see this internalization of some of these stereotypes and how damaging they can be. So then they can go out and try to make these changes. But we get a lot of resistance, because a lot of women don't want to accept this as, I don't want to have to deal with that. And unfortunately we do.
So you see it as well, Jodi?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's gotten worse.
And do we think it's also because, to be honest, it's very hard. There are only so many issues you can have on your plate every day, right? And the world we live in today has a lot of different challenges, agendas, and complexities, to the degree that it can be debilitating, right? There's sort of a new issue on every front. And with social media, right, all of that chatter gets amplified in many, many different ways. And maybe it's because there have been some advancements that it becomes harder to take up space and take up stage when there feels like there are more urgent items at the forefront. And in that problem, we're losing ground.
But I think the lever points really are in high school and college. I think that, but let's not make that simple, right? I said Carnegie Mellon, but there's not a lot of other examples. University of Maryland, I think, is pretty equitable too in terms of their CS program, but it's not a ton. And so what we need is leadership at the university level, and then we need leadership at, the high school level, literally making some of these changes. And they're not simple. I don't know how to create those movements because, we've got, 20,000, maybe even more different school departments in this nation. It's so small. So to make changes across all that is extraordinarily difficult. And then at the university level, many of the universities were skewing way female, but they're going into the social sciences. They're not going into the technology or engineering sciences. And then there's this fight within the university as to, you can't really say that, right? Because then you're diverting those women from the liberal arts into this, So there's all these turf wars that are happening. But that's where I do think the lever point is.
So I want to give some time for questions. So I'm going to bring this to a close with maybe, again, looking ahead and progressive. Where we are today, so if I bring several points that we discussed together, we know that there isn't, right at the beginning of whether it's a design of a product or in technology, there's limited women. However, all of you did say that it doesn't mean there aren't women in the game. It's just that they're not as visible and they're hesitant to be visible. Starting young is great, but starting young does not solve the problem for today. It will solve the problem in 5, 7, 12 years. So if today, with the assumption that in about 10 years, women are going to hold access to a lot of wealth, smart people today will bring women into designing financial products and technology to do that. If we kind of play on that thesis for a second, and I ask the three of you, if you were allowed to bring, say, 10 people or 5 people into a room and say, here's the problem, hash it, and give me a solution that we can solve, who are the 5 people you will bring in? And these could be just titles or roles, right? It doesn't have to be names. But what types of people would you bring to that conversation and say, here's a business imperative. Forget equity for a minute. Forget inclusivity. Who are the 5 people you might bring to that?
I'll jump in first. I think you need somebody who is a social scientist.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need somebody who is a philosopher. I think you need a technologist. I think you need a business person. And then I think you need whatever representative voice that you need extra in there. And then you come together and say, you have to meet all these needs. And I'm probably forgetting some because 5 is really short, but I think what you need, the most important piece of trying to get across is that what you need is a multitude of perspectives. You need to understand the impact of the externalities that come out of these new technologies and how they impact people disparately. And so we need to think about those at the upfront or early on in the design. And that needs to be part of it.
Rulonna, Namee, would you add to that table?
So I think that's it. I mean, I think that to me is a pretty spot on summation in terms of having just a diversity of voices and perspectives. Who they are probably less important than that we need breadth, and I would say with depth within each of those categories, right? Because obviously there's vast continuum of voices within that of all genders, right? So I think that is critical. I was going to add, as I was thinking through this and some of the roles that, Jodi just touched on, I'm a big fan of LaTanya Sweeney's, who is an MIT computer scientist. She's at the Kennedy School now. She was the founder of the Public Interest Tech Lab and the Data Privacy Lab. Her work on data privacy, I think, is absolutely fascinating. She's talking about ways in which to prevent the coming wave of jobs disappearing. By actually giving the power and ownership of people back to their data, and that companies have to subscribe to your data suitcase and pay you for your information rather than giving it away for free, which I'm a huge advocate of. So she is very much worth following and listening to. She's lots of really interesting things. She was the CTO of the FTC for a period of time. So I think an incredibly powerful voice on the scene. I think Siri Chilazi, who also happens to be at the Kennedy School as well. She's been a great voice in early stage investing and venture investing and gender bias within that. I think her voice is we've got to get more women putting money into early stage companies. So that same confidence gap, that same risk aversion that's causing women not to go into STEM educational choices, to not go into coding, to not use AI, also impacts their willingness to invest in early stage companies. And they are missing out also by not having a seat at that table. So I think she's a terrifically powerful voice. And frankly, then I'd have Jodi, Namee, and Jagati at the table as well, because I think these are hugely important voices.
Thank you. Go ahead. You both said it so nicely. There's nothing. I totally concur. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So why don't we'll open it up to questions. Feel free to come off mute and ask your question, or just type it into the chat box and we'll discuss that.
And while some people are putting some questions in, I just, as for fun, went into ChatGPT right before we jumped on and asked it to write a poem about gender bias in AI. And so I'll send a piece of it. One of the stanzas, I won't put the whole thing, which is actually pretty lengthy, but I thought that AI, mirror of its maker's mind, reflects the biases unkind, ignoring gender's fluid grace, assigning roles a rigid space. So I think that's well done, ChatGPT.
Yeah, self-awareness, isn't it? For a non-sentient technology, there's lots of self-awareness there. While you're thinking of questions, folks, maybe I'll ask you folks one more. We spoke, and this also came towards the end. We can solve the problem by getting the right people in the room, and from an actionable strategy like this group, right? We have a lot of male allies in the group, and I've talked with many of them one-on-one to know that they're very interested in making the change. So from an actionable strategy, no matter where they are in their careers, no matter what they do, what do you think men can do to normalize some of this inclusivity or opening the doors and welcoming diversity?
Well, we didn't talk about external implications that very much in our conversation, and I think there are a lot of them. And I'll give you a very simple one. Some of the work we do with some technology companies, the women constantly talk about how when there are, one or two women in the room, they're immediately questioning, where'd you go to school? Or are you a technologist? Or how long have you been coding? And so these questions, which immediately signal you don't belong and you're not smart enough, they need to be stopped. And so what an ally can do is go, hey, let's not ask those kinds of questions. She's here at this table. She's good enough. And so the ally supports that and sort of tones down this unconscious push to question somebody's skill set, and they ally with them. And so that's a simple thing that every single Sagittarius person, male or female, can do in that room.
Yeah. Or, another thing that I think just as simple as helping us amplify our messaging, just either through resharing even our LinkedIn posts, or when we share items about bias or gender equity. I think even that bit of support, helping us get the message out, is a very actionable, immediate, easy thing that people here could definitely help with.
And I think I'd just add in, I think both what Jodi and Namee said are exactly the right answer there. I would say I might turn it also on women ourselves to challenge each other in our female networks much more, to have these conversations. I think, very often I am rarely at a table or at an outing or at an event where women are actively talking about the future of how it's going to impact them collectively, right? We are very good as women at spending time in groups together, interacting in very connected ways, but often don't push ourselves around how we're looking towards the future from these types of dynamics, like how AI is going to impact us. And so I think I would say as a takeaway, challenge yourself, but also challenge the women in your circle of care and circle of, community to engage more.
I think that's a great point, and we do have a question, so I'm going to go into that in a minute. But there's a great point that I would encourage men, whether you're networking, whether you're at a family gathering, there always is an easy way to kind of go into groups that look like you, right? So if you don't see a woman in that office party or a meeting, encourage women or welcome them. And same thing with women. If you don't see diversity at a strategy meeting, if you're not seeing whether it's gender or any other kind of racial and other diversity, ask to be a part of that table, or ask them to bring somebody that might be relevant to that table. But let's go to two questions. We have a great comment by Ryan Moon. If you folks are reading your chat, go ahead and read that. But Shanglun had a question here. We spent time talking about the systemic changes that need to be changed in the investment and education landscapes. What are some things that startup founders can do at the product and culture level to improve equity in the AI space?
Well, I am trying to level the playing field in, for instance, in the interns that I've taken on just as a start. So this year we have 2 cohorts of interns, about like, let's just say roughly like 4 and 6. So we have, 30% women. So I've managed that. So again, not enough, but I feel like that's how you start, through, through experience, through hands-on experience, through education. So that's how you enable these women to go out into the world and have successful careers in AI.
Start them young. Kim, Ryan asked a question before you, so I'm going to go to that and then come to you. So Ryan asks a question: how may we leverage AI's apparent self-awareness of these biases and leverage that for rapid iterations to explore how we can create a more equitable future we seek and in the time frame we need?
Ask it.
So keep asking it, keep hitting it.
Keep asking it.
Yeah.
Keep
The
asking
more
it.
engagement. Yeah.
So, Ryan, like one of the things that alarmed me was, I think it was in January, I saw a post by, I think his last name is Spacek or something. He's like a Harvard researcher who asked ChatGPT to produce images of leadership.
Oh,
like,
yes.
what is an image of leadership? And it produced 5 images of leadership, and it was a tall, Caucasian-looking male, and just consistently across like all 5. And so that was actually the first like visualization of the inherent bias in AI. And so I really raised an alarm bell around that, because that was so blatantly biased. I mean, in so many ways. So I do feel like, because those kinds of image renderings, like when you have concepts like leadership, that became an issue, then I feel like Google then went the complete opposite way and then just basically turned that into a mockery. But let's just say, I think folks are trying. That was obviously a misguided effort. But just number one, let's at least like be aware of it. Let's be aware of the potential bias in training data, because when I then spoke up image rendering and I said that's horrible, like why is this model so biased, then a lot of people came on and basically were a little bit saying, well, that represents history, what do you expect? So basically, if you look at the way all these models are made, they take representations like different cuts of the internet, blah blah blah. So then I said, are you saying there are no there are no female leaders in history? Are there no non-Caucasian men in history who are leaders? Why does this thing always just create like Caucasian men as leaders all 5 times? Yeah. So let's be aware of these issues. Let's actually amplify. Let's talk about it. Let's challenge it. I'm not even sure that we're at that level where we're actually actively talking about it. So thank you, Ryan, for talking about that. And it is a big issue.
Well, and I think that, what this does highlights, let's talk about the advantage of some of those biases, is that that's exactly what came out of an algorithm. And now we can have a conversation around it. Right?
Yes.
So the advantage of this is it also brings to light in very stark contrast, in a very concentrated ways, where the deficits and where the biases exist. And so when we see those, chasing them down, to your point, Namee, when we see people pointing them out, rising to the occasion to engage in that dialogue and acknowledge the bias, and then help be part of the conversation around how you might reduce it going forward.
Absolutely.
Kim, is it a quick question that you can ask?
It just is a quick comment. Yes. I want to thank you guys so much, Jodi, Namee, and Rulonna, Jodi, just fantastic conversation. But one of the things I just wanted to mention is as I'm hearing the discussion too is, while there's so much that needs to be done in our own educational systems, reaching down, much earlier to young girls and so forth, just getting them into these fields and interested and so forth. Another trend that I am seeing, and my lens happens to be I'm working with primarily all international students, and I have a lot of women that are coming that actually do have these skill sets, and this is an area of interest. But kind of a concerning trend that we're starting to see as well is that, while we do have opportunities for, young women who are here with skill sets, the opportunity to stay under STEM OPT is becoming less and less and less. So we're even closing, some of those doors, or we're not keeping them as open as they should be, as we're educating many of these people, to be able to enter, be able to enter into these fields. So, I see that as this is a global conversation and a global issue that, this is another area of a lever that we need to be pushing is, creating those pathways for women, whoever they are, right, that are into our systems. But again, thank you so much. This was an awesome discussion.
But I think on that, thank you, Kim, because you brought that all nicely together, because we can keep talking for everybody. I see that Jodi had to jump off for the session. So Rulonna and Namee, thank you. I think we probably just, opened a few layers of this conversation. There's so much more to unpack here, but this is a great first start. And throughout the year, for the folks in our audience, throughout the year, we're going to have more such conversations to not just raise awareness, but to actually start bringing change to the conversation. If any of you have questions or would like to connect with the speakers, please find them on LinkedIn. And then we are planning to send a survey right after with the recording. So watch for that and let us know what you thought so that we can improve on these sessions as we go on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rulonna. Thank you, Namee.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.